Discovering arcade games as a kid was one of my favorite pastimes. Cab station, indoor mall, laundromat, convenience store, Pizza Hut, you name it, and I was always on the lookout for old and new games alike. I was so enthralled with the sights and sounds of arcade cabinets, I often found myself thumbing my nose up at home translations because they quite frankly weren't the same games. They looked kinda similar, they played kinda similar, but it was kinda like a Pinto sitting next to a Camaro. Both had doors, windows, and tires, but driving them was night and day. The arcade experience was the pinnacle of the hobby of gaming, crushing consoles and computers for years, and straddled the bleeding edge of digital entertainment. Just to be clear, I was an arcade kid, and I'm back with more games that you absolutely need to play from the days of cigarette-filled rooms, change machines, neon lights, and getting your ass kicked in seconds. I hope you guys enjoy Arcade Treasures Volume 3. In 1987, Data East released Karnov in the arcade, a brutally difficult run-and-gun platformer. You take control of the titled character in his quest for treasure. This is without question one of the hardest arcade games I would play in my younger years. It's a one-hit and you're dead type of game, and to counter the extremely short stages, enemies come at you fast and aggressive. Karnov was a great-looking game for its time. There's an impressive variety of enemies and they move and animate well. It also happens to have a really catchy tune that plays along to the action. Playing it here after years away was a sobering reminder of how hard a game could be. It chewed me up and shat me out right from the first stage, and couldn't have been a finer example of nostalgia from all those years ago. This one is short, difficult, and a pure adrenaline ride of survival. Ever wanted to play Panzer Dragoon in 2D? Well, Irum's 1989 arcade release Dragon Breed may be for you. You are perched upon the back of a dragon that is impervious to damage in this horizontally scrolling shoot-'em-up. Great graphics and sound are your highlights in this unique game, but I enjoyed the gameplay as well. The dragon's body can be used as a shield to protect the rider, creating many instances that set it apart from other shooters of the time. You also get powers like Dragon Flame, tail guns, and increased damage for your main shot. The enemy AI is of the chase you down until you die variety, so this is a really challenging game. This saw a number of ports to various micro PCs, but was surprisingly absent from consoles like the Mega Drive and PC Engine. It's a different kind of shooter that still holds up well today in presentation, gameplay, and challenge. Irum made some great games back then, and this one stands out as one of its best. In 1990, Taito released Space Gun, a first-person rail shooter that features extensive use of sprite scaling. You have responded to a deep space distress signal and discovered a spacecraft overrun by aliens and its crew taken hostage. You must blast your way through the enemy threat and rescue as many humans as possible. The gameplay here is familiar to anyone who loves light gun shooters. Aside from your normal rapid-fire attacks, you can collect more powerful weapons like flamethrowers and freeze bombs to clear out lots of enemies at once. There is also the ability to use a retreat button, which is actually a pedal in the arcade, so you can have more time to deal with everything in front of you. Larger enemies need to be dealt with strategically, often needing body parts blown away before you can actually permanently put it down. Visually, it's a stunner for a 1990 game. Smooth sprite scaling with both the enemies and environment convey a great sense of 3D space, and there is no shortage of things to kill. It came home for the Master System in 1992, but was severely pared back. In 1990, Taito also released Thunder Fox, a mixed-genre action game that was part beat-em-up, part run-and-gun, and part horizontal shoot-em-up. You were part of the dynamic duo of Thunder Fox, an ass-kicking anti-terrorist group out to rid the world of scum and villainry. Armed with your trusty Knife-O-Doom, you go to work to lay waste to hordes of bad guys, picking up other weapons like flamethrowers, grenades, handguns, and bazookas along the way. You won't only be fighting on foot either, and will also encounter vehicle-based shooter stages to change up the action a bit. Thunder Fox is a great-looking game. There is tons of parallax scrolling, environment set pieces, and every scene is loaded with great color and detail. This was the kind of game you went to the arcade for. You just didn't see this level of detail, animation, and crazy stuff going on in the backgrounds on home systems very often. Better still, the music was epic as well, an essential part of any action-based arcade game. This came home in a few different forms. The Sega Genesis saw a port in 1991, and it was available on the Taito Legends release for the Xbox and PS2. Technos Japan is famous for releasing Double Dragon in 1987, but they were back again in 1990 with the Comba Tribes, a co-op based beat-em-up that continues the great tradition of gang-related street fighting. This is, for all intents and purposes, the maturation of years of beat-em-up mechanics. You can punch and kick as always, but can now pick enemies up off the ground, grab two enemies at once, and even stomp them while they're down. There are quite a few more moves here than a typical brawler of the era, and you can play with up to 3 players at once. Visually, it destroys most games of the time. Everything is ultra colorful, there are tons of enemies at once, and the animation goes well beyond what you'd expect. It even sounds excellent. It was the kind of game that immediately caught your attention in the arcade, not just because of the way it looked and sounded, but also because of the variety in the gameplay made you want to be a part of it. There was a Super Nintendo version that was quite decent, but the arcade is the way to play it proper. Namco was responsible for 1995's The Out Foxys, the weirdly named arena fighter that pits you not just against other assassins, but also against stages that could do just as much damage. This game is absolute insanity from the moment it starts. As you do battle, the arena begins to unravel and fall apart. Within each arena, there are hazards flooding, biting, crushing, burning, and inflicting all other manner of damage to its combatants. Each fighter has a basic attack that isn't really worth a damn, but you can pick up weapons and items during battle to help that out. There actually isn't much special about the gameplay here. It's pretty basic in terms of setup, with the real strength being the stage variety and set pieces. The arcade board it was on was designed to scale and rotate sprites heavily, making this game a visual stunner if you appreciated the effect. It's often cited as the unofficial inspiration for the Smash Bros. Games. but at the time it wasn't a big success for Namco and was only released in Japanese arcades. I didn't discover it until years later myself, and definitely recommend it for its visual prowess and unique gameplay.
Gun. 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 Gun.
Capcom's arcade beat-em-ups came swift and often in the early to mid-90s. It seemed every time I visited an arcade, they had something new out. While they were all good games, it was 1993's The Punisher that I want to cover in this episode. Based on the Marvel Comics character and story, you are Frank Castle out to avenge the death of your family. Nick Fury joins you as a second player for co-op play as you both hunt down the notorious Kingpin. Using the basic formula of other Capcom beat-em-ups like Final Fight, the goal here is to whoop ass in side-scrolling stages until you meet a boss to end the level. Gameplay is both classic fisticuffs and grapples, as well as periodic gunplay. You also have the ability to grenade enemies with special attacks that help clear out large mobs. This was done on the CPS Dash arcade system, and is a wonderful looking game. Lots of large, highly detailed characters flood the screen, and there are no shortages of items and weapons to pick up and clean house with. The animation is brilliant as well, and even the sound is pretty good. It was brought home only for the Sega Genesis, and while that version was fun, this is the one you want to play. Capcom was also responsible for 1990's Carrier Airwing, a horizontal shoot-'em-up that allowed you to pick from 3 popular jet fighters to stop the expansion of an aggressive military state that just attacked Japan. I always thought of this as a 2D equivalent to Afterburner. It has great takeoff and landing sequences, limited missiles and bombs, as well as both air and ground targets to worry about. It has the usual assortment of power-ups, and you can buy additional weaponry from an in-game shop with your earned monies. You have a fuel gauge in this one that depletes over time, and when you take damage. Once gone, you lose a life. The presentation is great for the most part, though there is a fair amount of repetition in the enemies. I do like the animations from the explosions, and there are some parallax effects on a few of the stages. It very much reminds you of UN Squadron, another shooter from Capcom, so if you enjoyed that, this one here should appeal as well. Konami hit a Grand Slam home run in 1993 with the awesome Metamorphic Force. This 2 to 4 player beat 'em up had you choosing an ancient warrior capable of morphing into powerful beasts to stop the revival of an evil king hell-bent on ruling the world. This is what I imagined Altered Beast 2 would have been had Sega made a sequel for the Genesis. When in human form, you can punch and kick and even hit your enemies on the ground. But morphed into your beast form, you become an overpowered killing machine that is faster, stronger, and capable of much more carnage. This form only lasts until your gauge runs out, so you need to do as much damage as possible while you have it. Metamorphic Force is a great looking game. Huge sprites, smooth animations, and lots of little touches like scaling items and exploding enemies punctuate the brilliant presentation. I recommend you play the Japanese version of the arcade due to its much more fair life bar implementation and the final stage. The US release sees you lose life without taking damage over time, and the last stage is a bullshit boss rush that just eats quarters. Namco released the adorable Cosmo game The Video in 1992, a shooter very similar to the Galaga series of games. You move screen to screen in a bid to rid the Earth of the troublesome Cosmo gang, irritating little alien bastards that are trying to destroy you. Each scene has the enemy flying in patterns from the left and the right, and those that aren't destroyed continuing to attack from the center. If you've played Galaga 88, you know exactly what to expect here. The nice thing about this is that it's 2-player co-op, adding some nice variety to this style of shooter. You do get power-ups like double blasters and vortex bombs, and there are bonus stages as well. The graphics aren't anything to brag about, but they are colorful and the enemies are drawn well. It has an excellent soundtrack that really helps too. This one is more for the Golden Age arcade fans, sort of an upgraded take on a style of game that has been around for 3 decades. There is a Super Famicom port of it if you want to play it at home, but the arcade still looks and sounds better. There we are guys, 10 more arcade treasures for you to discover, or revisit if that's the case. Some of these are really difficult and require some serious dedication to defeat, while others are just strolls through the park with endless continues. I found that I actually had an appreciation for both types of arcade games. There were those that would sit you back in the stage a good bit when you died, but this prompted you to play harder, and you felt a great sense of accomplishment when a certain level or boss was defeated. The games that let you continue right from where you died also had an appeal. They were the games that gave you a break from the ass kicking the arcade dished out regularly. Your quarters lasted longer, and you often had games you could actually defeat. I don't think I can really look down on either type, as they both served a purpose to keep you coming back for more. Variety is the spice of life, and these games will give you plenty to enjoy. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.